Before we begin this extraordinary story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever witnessed a moment that completely shattered everything you believed about human nature. Because what happened in a small town near Kyoto in late 1945 defied every expectation, broke every rule of post-war occupation, and revealed a truth about humanity that historians rarely talk about. This isn't just another war story. This is about the moment when the entire social order collapsed, when enemies became something else entirely, and when a simple act at a dinner table rewrote what reconciliation could mean. What you're about to hear sounds impossible. In the aftermath of the most brutal war the Pacific had ever seen, with wounds still fresh and hatred still burning on both sides, a group of soldiers made a decision that left an entire room of people speechless, frozen in disbelief, unable to process what was being offered to them. The women in that room had prepared for cruelty, for coldness, for the punishment they'd been told to expect. Instead, they received something so unexpected, so profoundly human, that some of them wept not from pain but from the shock of being treated as equals. This story matters because it happened in the shadows of history, unrecorded by official documents, unmentioned in the grand narratives of victory and defeat. But for the people in that room, it was the moment everything changed. It was the moment when dignity was restored to those who thought they'd lost it forever. And it began with the simplest, most revolutionary act imaginable in that time and place. An invitation to sit down together. The year is 1945. The war has just ended. Japan lies in ruins, its cities reduced to ash, its people shattered by defeat, hunger, and the trauma of unimaginable loss. In the small town near Kyoto, life moves in a strange, suspended state between devastation and the unknown future. The cherry trees still bloom each spring, but the people who once celebrated beneath them are gone. Dead in distant battlefields, or incinerated in the firebombing campaigns that turned entire neighborhoods into crematoriums. The survivors move like ghosts through streets they no longer recognize, past buildings that are now just skeletal frames against the sky. Among these survivors are the women. Young women, most of them. Some are widows who received the dreaded notification that their husbands would never return from Okinawa, from Iwo Jima, from the countless islands where Japanese soldiers fought to the last man. Others are students whose education was interrupted by the war, who spent their teenage years working in munitions factories instead of studying literature and art. Still others are simply daughters trying to keep their families alive, bartering whatever they have for a handful of rice, navigating a world where the rules have completely changed and the occupying forces now control everything. They have been taught to fear the occupiers. The propaganda during the war was relentless, brutal in its messaging. They were told that enemy soldiers were monsters, that occupation would mean unspeakable horrors, that death was preferable to capture. Some families had prepared for mass suicide when the Americans landed. Now, with British forces establishing relief stations in the region, the fear has a different flavor, but remains just as potent. These women have heard whispers, rumors, horror stories from other towns. They don't know what to believe, but they know they must be careful, must keep their heads down, must never draw attention to themselves. So when the request comes for volunteers to help clean and organize the British relief station on the edge of town, the women who step forward do so out of necessity, not choice. They need the work, they need whatever food rations might come with it. Their families are starving. Pride is a luxury they can no longer afford. The relief station itself is a repurposed building that once served as a community center, a place where the town gathered for festivals and celebrations in what now feels like a different lifetime. The British have transformed it into a distribution hub, a place where supplies flow in and are organized for dispersal to the surrounding communities. It's clean, efficient, and utterly foreign to the women who arrived that first morning. November rain drizzling down, their worn shoes squelching in the mud, their heads bowed so low their chins nearly touch their chests. They enter through the side door, as instructed. None of them dare look directly at the soldiers. This is the first rule of survival under occupation. Make yourself invisible. Make yourself small. Give them no reason to notice you. They keep their eyes on the floor, on the worn wooden planks that still bear scorch marks from some long ago fire. They move in a tight cluster, drawing strength from proximity. Their breathing shallow and quick. The British soldiers are young men themselves, most of them barely into their 20s, from places like Manchester and Liverpool and small villages in the Scottish Highlands. They've seen combat, these men. They've buried friends. They've witnessed horrors that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. But they've also received very specific instructions from their commanding officers about how to conduct themselves during occupation, instructions that differ markedly from what some other forces are doing in other parts of the country. Their commander, a captain named William Morrison, is a schoolteacher from Yorkshire in civilian life, a man who believes deeply that how they treat the defeated Japanese will determine what kind of peace emerges from this catastrophic war. Captain Morrison is in the station that morning, observing as the women file in. He's in his early 30s, prematurely gray, with the kind of weathered face that comes from too many months in the field. But his eyes are kind, genuinely kind. And he watches these terrified young women with something that looks like profound sadness. He knows what they're expecting. He knows what they've been told. And he's determined to prove every single one of those expectations wrong. The morning passes in tense silence. The women work quickly, efficiently, sorting through crates of supplies, organizing medical equipment, sweeping floors that are already clean. The soldiers go about their duties, maintaining a respectful distance, speaking quietly among themselves. A few of them smile at the women, gentle smiles meant to be reassuring. But the women don't smile back. They don't know how to interpret kindness from men in uniform. Kindness feels like a trap. One of the women is named Keiko. She's 23 years old, though she looks older, aged by grief and malnutrition. Her husband died at Saipan. She has no children, which is both a blessing and a curse. She has one less mouth to feed, but also one less reason to keep going. She works methodically, her movements precise, trying to anticipate what needs to be done before anyone has to tell her. She's good at reading rooms, at sensing what people want. It's how she's survived this long. Another woman, Yuki, is only 19. A former student who can recite classical poetry from memory, but doesn't know if her university will ever reopen. She has delicate hands that shake slightly as she stacks boxes. Hands that once practiced calligraphy for hours, but now bear calluses from hard labor. She keeps glancing at the British soldiers from the corner of her eye, trying to reconcile their normalcy, the way they laugh at jokes, the way they help each other lift heavy crates, with the monsters she was told they would be. Then there's Tomoko, the oldest of the group at 28, a widow with 2 young children at home being cared for by her elderly mother. Tomoko carries a hardness in her expression, a protective shell built from too many disappointments. She trusts nothing and no one anymore. When one of the soldiers accidentally drops a box near her, she flinches so violently she nearly falls, and the soldier immediately steps back, hands raised in apology, his face stricken with concern. The interaction lasts only seconds, but Tomoko feels something crack inside her chest, some small fissure in the armor she's built. As midday approaches, Captain Morrison speaks quietly with his men. They've been planning this moment, discussing it in detail the night before. Morrison has made his position clear. These women are not the enemy. They never were. They're survivors of a war they didn't choose, and how the British treat them now will echo through generations. Some of his men were skeptical at first, still carrying rage over friends lost in Burma and Singapore. But Morrison has slowly, patiently, helped them see that perpetuating cycles of dehumanization serves no one. When the clock strikes noon, one of the soldiers, a corporal named Davies, begins setting up a long table in the main room. The women watch from the corners, uncertain what's happening. More soldiers join, bringing out chairs, laying down a simple cloth. Then comes the food. Nothing fancy, just standard military rations, bread, tinned meat, some vegetables, tea. But it's more food than most of these women have seen in months. The women assume this is the soldiers' lunch that they'll be dismissed to eat. Their own meager portions outside or in the back room. They begin to gather their things, preparing to leave. That's when Captain Morrison steps forward. He's not a tall man and he doesn't have a commanding voice. He speaks softly, in careful Japanese that he's been learning from a phrasebook, the words clumsy but sincere. "Please," he says, gesturing to the table, to the chairs. "Please, sit with us." The room falls into absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels like it has physical weight, pressing down on everyone present. The women freeze, literally freeze mid-motion, unable to process what they've just heard. Surely they misunderstood. Surely he can't mean what they think he means. One of the soldiers, following Morrison's lead, pulls out a chair and gestures again, more clearly this time. The invitation is unmistakable. They're being asked to sit at the same table as the soldiers, to eat the same food, not as servants, not as conquered people, but as equals. Keiko feels her throat tighten. This can't be real. In Japanese society, even before the war, Hierarchy was everything. Teachers ate separately from students, bosses from workers, men from women in many contexts. And now, in defeat, with the social order shattered, the rules should be even stricter. The victors eat first, eat better, eat separately. Everyone knows this. It's the natural order of things, especially in war. But these soldiers are standing there, waiting, their expressions open and genuine. Captain Morrison says something else, his Japanese broken but the meaning clear. You work, you eat, same table. Please. Yuki whispers, barely audible. Are we allowed? The question hangs in the air, heavy with the weight of everything they've lost, everything they've been taught, everything they believe about their place in this new world order. A soldier named Thompson, a baker's son from Cornwall with a round, friendly face, simply smiles and passes a piece of bread to the nearest woman. Just hands it to her directly, no ceremony, no hierarchy, just one human being offering food to another. The woman takes it with trembling hands. She's crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, and she doesn't even know why. Maybe it's relief. Maybe it's confusion. Maybe it's the sudden, overwhelming realization that she's been holding her breath for months, for years, waiting for cruelty that isn't coming. Slowly, with the tentative movements of people approaching something they're afraid might vanish if they move too quickly. The women begin to sit. They choose seats at the far end of the table at first, clustering together, maintaining distance. But the soldiers deliberately spread themselves out, integrating themselves along the table's length, creating a pattern that's unmistakably communal. This isn't the occupier's table with the occupied watching from afar. This is a shared table. The meal begins in awkward silence. The women don't know what to do with their hands, where to look, how to eat without drawing attention. They take the smallest possible portions, expecting to be reprimanded for taking too much. But every time they do, a soldier quietly adds more to their plates. When Tomoko tries to refuse, shaking her head, the soldier named Davies simply says in English, his tone gentle, "Please, you've worked hard. You need to eat." She doesn't understand the words, but she understands the meaning. Captain Morrison sits in the middle, deliberately, positioning himself between Japanese women and British soldiers, modeling the integration he wants to see. He eats slowly, talks quietly with the men near him, occasionally glancing at the women with that same expression of gentle sadness. He knows what this moment means, even if they don't yet. He knows that in 50 years, someone might ask these women what they remember about the occupation, and he wants this to be part of their answer. Not cruelty, not domination, but this. The moment they were invited to sit at the table. Gradually, incrementally, the tension begins to ease. One of the soldiers, a Welshman named Griffiths who plays harmonica, starts humming softly, a cheerful tune that makes a few people smile despite themselves. Another soldier attempts a joke in terrible Japanese, mangling the words so badly that one of the women, to everyone's shock, including her own, lets out a startled laugh. She immediately covers her mouth, horrified at herself. But the soldiers laugh too, warm and genuine, and suddenly the ice begins to crack. Keiko finds herself sitting next to a young corporal who can't be more than 20. He's eating with the focused intensity of someone who's known real hunger, and something about this makes her relax slightly. He's not some distant, incomprehensible other. He's just a young man who's tired and far from home, eating lunch. When he notices her watching, he doesn't glare or assert dominance. He just smiles, that same gentle smile, and pushes the breadbasket closer to her. Yuki, emboldened by the shifting atmosphere, whispers a question in Japanese to the woman beside her. Why are they doing this? The woman, older and slightly bolder, shrugs. Maybe, she whispers back. They don't see us as enemies. The phrase ripples through the women like electricity. Don't see us as enemies. The concept is revolutionary, impossible, and yet here they are, living proof of its possibility. They're sitting at a table with men who, by all rights, should hate them. Men whose friends and brothers they were told died fighting Japan. Men who have every reason to want revenge. And instead of revenge, they're offering bread. One of the soldiers, noticing how the women still seem hesitant, how they're barely eating, stands up and begins serving them directly, spooning vegetables onto their plates, pouring tea into their cups. It's such a profound reversal of expected power dynamics that Tomoko actually gasps. In her entire life, she has never been served by a man, let alone a foreign soldier, let alone a member of an occupying force. The gesture is so unexpected, so completely antithetical to everything she believed about how the world works, that something fundamental shifts inside her. Captain Morrison watches this unfold with quiet satisfaction. This is what he'd hoped for, what he'd argued about with his superior officers, what he believed was possible even when others called him naive. He believed that breaking bread together was more powerful than any peace treaty, that these small moments of shared humanity could plant seeds that might grow into genuine reconciliation. He believed that these women, if treated with dignity now, would remember it forever, would tell their children and grandchildren about the day the British soldiers invited them to eat as equals. As the meal continues, something miraculous begins to happen. The conversation, halting at first, begins to flow. The language barrier is significant, but people find ways. Hand gestures, drawings on napkins, shared laughter at miscommunications. One of the soldiers pulls out a photograph of his family back home, shows it to Keiko. She stares at it for a long moment, seeing his mother and father standing in front of a small cottage, and realizes with a start that he misses his home just as much as she grieves for the life she's lost. They're not so different, she and this young British soldier. They're both just trying to survive, to find meaning, in a world that's been torn apart. Yuki asks, through a series of gestures and simple words, where the soldiers are from. When they point to a map and show her England, she experiences a moment of cognitive dissonance. These men came from halfway across the world to fight a war. And now they're here, sharing their food with her. The sheer improbability of it, the strange and terrible path that brought them all to this moment, overwhelms her. She thinks about how many people had to die, how many bombs had to fall, how much hatred had to burn before arriving at this table, this moment, this unexpected kindness. As the meal winds down, Captain Morrison stands and addresses the room in his careful, broken Japanese. He thanks the women for their work, tells them they're welcome to return tomorrow, assures them they'll always eat together, always as equals. He uses a word, nakama, comrades, that makes several of the women's eyes widen. Comrades, not servants, not the defeated. Comrades. One of the women, emboldened by the meal and the kindness, asks a question that's been burning inside her. Why? Her voice is small but clear. Why do you treat us this way? Captain Morrison considers the question carefully. Through a combination of Japanese and English, with help from a soldier who speaks slightly better Japanese, he explains. He talks about his life as a teacher before the war, about his belief that education only works when people are treated with dignity. He talks about how he's seen enough hatred, enough death, enough suffering. He talks about how the war is over, and continuing to treat former enemies as less than human serves no purpose except to perpetuate pain. But then he says something that cuts straight to the heart of everything. He says in halting but sincere Japanese, "Because you are human, same as us. War make people forget this. But war is finished now. We must remember again." The silence that follows is profound. Several of the women are openly crying now, tears streaming down their faces as they try to process this radical notion. For months, they've been treated as pariahs in their own country, blamed for the defeat, struggling to survive in a society that's collapsed around them. And here, in this unlikely place, foreign soldiers are affirming their humanity, their worth, their right to be treated with respect. Tomoko, the hardened widow who trusts no one, feels something break inside her, not painfully but like ice breaking in. Spring, allowing something new to grow. She bows deeply to Captain Morrison, a bow of genuine respect rather than subservient fear. And he bows back, equally deep, acknowledging her as an equal. As the women prepare to leave that afternoon, everything has changed. They walk differently, hold their heads slightly higher. The weight they've been carrying, the weight of shame, of fear, of expecting cruelty, has lightened, just a fraction, but enough to make breathing easier. They exchange glances. Among themselves, small smiles of shared astonishment. Did that really just happen? Did they really just share a meal as equals with the occupying forces? Keiko pauses at the door, turns back to look at the room one more time. The soldiers are cleaning up, laughing among themselves, ordinary young men doing ordinary tasks. But what happened here wasn't ordinary at all. It was revolutionary. It was the kind of moment that redefines what's possible, that cracks open the door to a different kind of future. The women return the next day, and the next, and the pattern continues. Every day, at noon, they sit together at the same table. The initial awkwardness gradually fades, replaced by something approaching genuine camaraderie. The soldiers learn a few words of Japanese. The women learn a few words of English. They discover shared interests, One soldier and one woman both love music. Another pair bond over their shared experience of losing siblings. Slowly, tentatively, carefully, they stop. Seeing each other as categories, occupier and occupied, victor and defeated, and start seeing each other as individuals. Word spreads through the town. Other women hear about what's happening at the British relief station, and some are skeptical, certain there must be some hidden agenda, some ulterior motive. But others are curious, desperate for any sign that the world might contain more kindness than they've been led to believe. More volunteers come forward. The circle widens. Captain Morrison knows this won't solve everything. He knows there are British soldiers elsewhere behaving badly. Knows there are deep wounds that will take generations to heal. Knows that one small relief station sharing meals is not going to undo the trauma of war. But he also knows that every person who experiences this kind of treatment, who has their humanity affirmed rather than denied, becomes a seed of potential reconciliation. These women will tell their children about this. Those children will grow up, knowing that even in the darkest times, even after the most brutal conflicts, some people chose compassion over cruelty. One evening, about 2 weeks into this new arrangement, something extraordinary happens. The women, unprompted, bring food from their own meager supplies to contribute to the shared meal. It's not much, some pickled vegetables, a small amount of rice one family could spare, but the symbolism is profound. They're not just accepting charity anymore. They're participating, contributing, transforming the dynamic from one of givers and receivers into something truly communal. The soldiers are visibly moved. One of them, a tough sergeant from Glasgow who rarely shows emotion, has to turn away to hide the tears in his eyes. This is what they've been hoping for. This moment of genuine reciprocity. This sign that the walls are truly coming down. But not everyone in the town approves. There are older men, former military officers, who view this fraternization as shameful, a betrayal of Japanese honor. There are whispers, accusations that the women are collaborators, that they're degrading themselves. One evening, a small group of these men confront several women as they're walking home from the relief station. The confrontation is ugly. The men call the women traitors, accuse them of dishonoring their dead husbands and brothers. Tomoko, who has found unexpected strength in these past weeks, stands her ground. They treat us with respect, she says, her voice steady. They share their food as equals. They see us as human beings. When was the last time anyone in this town did that? The question hangs in the air, unanswerable. Because the truth is that in the chaos of defeat and occupation, Japanese society has turned on itself, everyone scrambling for survival, blame and shame flowing in every direction. These women have found dignity not from their own community, but from the supposed enemy. The cognitive dissonance is too much for some to bear. But Tomoko continues, her voice gaining strength. My husband died believing he was protecting our way of life. But our way of life is gone. We have to build something new. And maybe, just maybe, building it with compassion instead of more hatred is the right way forward. The men have no response to this. They leave, muttering, but the confrontation marks a turning point. The women realize they're not just participating in shared meals. They're participating in a quiet revolution, a reimagining of what post-war society could become. Back at the relief station, Captain Morrison has his own challenges. Some of his superior officers question his methods, worry that he's being too soft, that he's not maintaining proper distance and authority. There are reports, questions, veiled suggestions that perhaps he should return to more traditional occupation protocols. Morrison stands his ground. He submits detailed reports about the positive outcomes, about how the women work harder and more efficiently because they're treated well, about how community relations are better in this area than in regions where stricter occupation rules are enforced. He argues that this approach isn't just morally right, it's strategically sound. People who are treated with dignity are less likely to harbor resentment, less likely to support resistance movements, more likely to participate in building a stable, peaceful future. His argument eventually wins out, partly because the results speak for themselves. The relief station becomes a model, a place other officers visit to see what's possible when occupation is conducted with humanity rather than dominance. Months pass, winter comes, harsh and cold, and the shared meals continue. On Christmas, the soldiers and women together create a celebration that blends British and Japanese traditions, a hybrid event that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. They sing songs, British carols and Japanese folk songs, and while most people don't understand the words of the others' songs, they understand the spirit behind them. Keiko gives Captain Morrison a small gift, a paper crane she folded, a symbol of hope and peace. Morrison is so moved he can barely speak. He carefully places the crane in his pocket, carries it with him every day for the rest of his time in Japan, and eventually brings it home to England where it sits on his desk for the rest of his life. Yuki discovers that one of the soldiers, the young corporal she often sits next to, is also a student of literature in his civilian life. Despite the language barrier, they find ways to discuss their favorite books, to share their love of stories. Years later, Yuki will become a teacher herself, and she'll tell her students about this time, about how literature and art and shared humanity can bridge even the widest divides. But the most profound transformation happens to Tomoko. The bitter, hardened widow slowly opens up, allows herself to hope again, to imagine a